Welcome to the Nurture Network podcast, where motherhood meets transformation. I'm Jess Baldenhofer, certified parent coach, educator, and mom on a mission to help you move beyond overwhelm and create a deeper connection with your kids and yourself. Each episode is packed with real tools, relatable stories, and the support you deserve. Let's dive in and take another step toward the peaceful, fulfilling parenting journey you've been searching for. Hi, welcome to the Nurture Network. I am so excited today because I have a special guest. Her name is Amy Pierre-Russo, and she is a certified life and leadership coach who helps working moms, create more clarity, balance, and sustainable support in both their work lives and their home lives. So welcome, Amy.
Thank you so much for having me, Jess. Everything around your brand and nurturing for moms especially just resonates so much. So I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, that's a major reason why we're together today, is to chat about like all this overlap we see with moms, right? In terms of how they nurture themselves and then how they're able to nurture their children. And a lot of that does come into this sort of idea of like this crazy idea of balance that we're all sort of touted many times. And I think so many working moms especially feel like they're constantly falling short, whether at work, at home, or for themselves. But I also feel like we should start by saying when we say working moms, we're talking about basically all moms, because most moms are not only are they actually working as being a mom, that is a job in itself, that is 17 jobs in itself, but also working outside the home or in the home can look like so many different things. So I don't know if you want to speak a little bit about that, like how you define working mom.
Yeah. So I work predominantly with working moms, and I'm so glad that you mentioned that specifically, because I think these days there is a lot of ambiguity and gray space. And especially societally, like if you work from home, if you have, something you're calling more of a side hustle, or you're trying to grow your business, it's not necessarily recognized with the same weight and with the same value that maybe like a W-2 job or something a bit more traditional is recognized with. And so I see this with moms as them kind of like devaluing, in a sense, what they do and what their contribution really is, because they work from home or they work remotely, and, there's judgment or criticism from outside about that. And so it stinks that that's even the starting point of the conversation, but like recognizing you are a working mom and you have these different tools in your life that you need to focus to and tend to in order to do justice.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like we've been told that, like you said, it kind of stinks, the societal pressure. If we just find this like better balance, that, everything will be figured out. So we're just kind of in this constant search and this constant reach for this balance. So I don't think that's the problem, that we can't balance it all. I think the idea of balance doesn't actually work for how most of us are living. So do you see that societal idea of balance sort of creating more pressure and therefore sending us in the wrong direction,
Yeah. It's funny because I've been talking about this for so long that I kind of like reject the balance. And it feels like now when I hear that, it's like red flag, red flag. It's a myth. And the reason I walked away from that with my clients is because I saw it adding this unnecessary weight and burden and stress to people. But now, the longer that I've done this work, and now, doing years of moving away from balance and calling, the pursuit of harmony instead, what I've recognized for myself is that I see the word balance as a bit more reactionary. And what I saw for my clients is that they were, getting things thrown at them and, having different things that they had to do or that they should do. and I'm going to balance. I'm going to like do this juggling, I picture like this circus act, like, juggling all the things, you're keeping it balanced. When meanwhile, you think of something like harmony, and I think of that as you are creating, you are proactively looking at what's ahead and designing something that allows, I'm going to, lean in here, I'm going to pull back there and design a system that works. And so, even just in thinking about the words and like the feeling you get with the words, I feel this, pull towards being proactive in your approach and the weight that that lifts off of your shoulders to have a plan and move forward in harmony.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that word harmony that you use because balance really does assume like separation. We almost see like a weight, right? With like two
Mm,
different things and then it has to be balanced.
mm,
But that word harmony really brings up the idea of like integration. And
mm,
also, harmony is not like two things, right? It's
mm,
this variety of things that have to, that sort of flow together as opposed to like
mm.
separate, balance, right?
Yeah.
It's much more sort of integrated. And it brings up that there's like really no clean line between these things, right?
Mm,
Anymore, anyway. I feel like that's changed a lot, especially since
yeah.
COVID.
Yeah. And I love that you say that too, because it's not just two things. I agree that it feels like when my clients are thinking more about their harmonious life and what that includes, it is a more full life, like thinking about all of the little pieces, the things that bring you joy, and like really thinking about what that looks like for you. And so I do think that, leaning towards creating more harmony, it actually is freeing. But
Mm,
I think that sometimes I've worked with clients who are more free spirited who think like, oh, designing a plan, like that sounds like work.
right.
That sounds, it also sounds confining, right? If you haven't done that in the past, it feels like, oh, well, like, wait a minute, I need to come up with a plan. I need to like, confine myself to this like system or structure. And so many of us in our work are looking for flexibility and like more, spaciousness. And so I actually find that it's the opposite. Having this plan and being proactive, it lets you know like the guardrails or, this is the direction I'm moving towards. And so you are actually able to have more freedom in a sense because you know where you're going, you know the direction.
It's so interesting because as you're talking, obviously, a lot of my clients are parents.
Mhm,
Most of them are, all of them are. So that reminds me a lot of like how we talk about children, right? And the
mhm.
benefits of sort of plans and structures for children, while
Yeah.
at the same time, like allowing for emotions and flexibility and teaching
Mhm,
resilience and all of these things. So it's very similar to what we really need to do to support ourselves, right? Which is
mhm,
having this structure, having these guardrails, as you say, but
mhm,
like within that, almost thinking of like water and like flowing and harmony really
mhm.
reminds me of like, if you are in harmony, then everything's changing all the time within those guardrails.
Yeah, yeah. And it's not as scary because you have clarity about, ultimately what you want and what you're moving towards. It's not like you said, the resilience. You're building up that toolkit of what you need to, even on the off day, even when your child didn't sleep last night or they're homesick with a fever, to have your baseline of like, okay, this is okay. I'm physically okay. And like I can navigate this. It's fine. And for a lot of times, my clients also knowing your priorities clearly enough to look at the calendar and at a glance be able to derive this is the thing. My kid's sick, everything unexpected happened. This is the meeting, everything else needs to move. And so you get better at that. It's like building a muscle because you're focused on like this planning, this deriving your core focus. You are able to, in a moment's notice when life happens, better say, hey, this is what I'm going all in on, even just for today.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And, one of the main things that I hear from my clients is just this constant guilt, right? This constant
Mm,
guilt that they're not getting anything right, that
mm,
there's so much on their plates and there's so much that they're carrying as a parent.
mm.
And then, that bleeds into life. And then that there's so much carrying that they're carrying around work and then their life and their personal stuff and there is bleeding into, they just feel guilty all across the board.
Yeah.
And plus, on top of that, there's just this added societal layer of like getting it right, staying in control. So in some ways, we kind of use this coping mechanism as control or as like keeping
Mm,
everything in order
mm.
to feel on top of things. But it actually winds up creating more stress because we're giving ourselves these unrealistic expectations. The society is
Yeah.
giving us these unrealistic expectations.
Yeah.
Do you see moms like, the guilt sometimes also drives us to this message that like we are the ones who have to fix everything. We are the ones who
Mm.
have to do everything. So in your work, do you see moms trying to manage everything internally before asking for support or thinking like, I feel guilty all the time. I feel stretched all the time, but extra support is too much.
Yeah. I think that the title of today's episode, like, I just love it so much, which is integrating work, motherhood, and you. Like, the integration
Yeah.
is just so important because I think with your question and where this guilt stems from, a lot of time, like, even as you're rattling off that list of all of the things that we have to do and keep up with, like, it is like it's laughable because it is a lot. And what I notice is that people don't see when they're in it and in the thick of it, they're not acknowledging and giving themselves credit for really how much they are doing and taking on and effectively navigating. So that's a huge part of it. Like working with a coach, working with someone like you or with me is just an opportunity to have this outside lens of, wait a minute, like let's slow down long enough to acknowledge what you've done, look back, reflect, what are the wins, all of those things that you have under your belt so you can really first like allow yourself to be proud of the progress that you're making. I used to say things like that, and I feel like it was diminished in some way, but it's because, especially if you're really driven and motivated, you're like, okay, yeah, I did that, but like, let's get to the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
and and while I recognize I relate to that, but it does signal to your brain, hey, you're on the right track. You're making progress. What you're doing is working for you to slow down long enough and acknowledge. And then moving forward from there is to your question about like the support and the like, building out a community of support. I think when you're clear, like, hey, this is everything that I have, like that I have, really acknowledging how much it is, it's easier to say, okay, and now with my plan for, let's say the next 3 months, these are the things I'm going to accomplish. I have a lot going on at home. I have a lot going on at work. And so again, getting back to that proactive. And so I'm going to, get the groceries delivered. I'm going to have my partner pick up the kids from school, even though that's something I usually do. I'm going to manage the situation. And I think just that alone, I see it be really confidence inducing because rather than being in reaction mode, like, oh my gosh, I have to like, chase after life is happening to me, it's taking the reins and instilling confidence in yourself, people around you just feel like, you really got it under control when you're leaning into those support systems.
Yeah, I love what you're saying because a lot of times what I see with my clients too is that they are struggling because they can't find like gentleness for their
Mm,
child. And the reason for that is because they don't know how to be gentle with themselves.
well,
And so a lot of that, what you're talking about is just this practice of zooming out, seeing the big picture,
yeah,
seeing everything you are accomplishing, like being proud of yourself, allowing yourself to give yourself that positive feedback.
yeah,
And at the same time, like that's actually where growth comes from, right? Is
mm,
coming from this place of like, okay, keep going, keep step on the next step. You got this,
Yeah.
as opposed to kind of like this negative self talk that we do where we're
Mm.
just kind of beating ourselves up for not doing enough. And, a lot of societal expectations do not help women in these scenarios.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think that's really important. What you're saying too is you have these societal norms that we've come to accept that sometimes you're playing within, and really clearly defining for yourself, what do you want? That's the powerful piece that people who come to work with me, it's like you are having agency, having control, and like really moving away from maybe things that you've adopted that you didn't even realize. Maybe since childhood, you've just accepted certain things are. And so, really, tapping into those like false norms, false truths that you've accepted, and now gaining clarity like this is what you actually want for yourself. And I think as people in general, but moms, parents these days, life is moving so quickly that sometimes, people are asking, we're talking about how to carve out 20 minutes in the day for someone to have
Yeah.
for themselves. And so it doesn't feel like there's time and space to ask these expansive questions and think about designing a life that is your own and really works for you. But that's really the heart of my work, is making sure that we're designing your life and work fits into that equation, not the other way around.
Yeah, I love what you're talking about too, because I'm almost getting this imagery as people are working with you of like you bringing them back to their center and their
Mm,
why and their purpose, because
mm,
then motherhood, womanhood, friendship, partnership, work, it all kind of has that internal anchor
mm,
to work with, right? And that's what
yeah.
creates the harmony. But you can't almost have the harmony if everything is just floating out in the air by itself, right?
Hmm.
And you're desperately trying to like swoop it all in and keep it all together, but really there's no center and there's no anchor. And without that like purpose and understanding of why we're doing what we're doing and making sure like, this is work. Okay, maybe I have to do it, but like, can I find some benefit in it, or can I, or am I doing work that I don't have to do, and
Hmm.
it's not bringing me any joy? And then how is that
Hmm.
bleeding into the rest of my life? And if you don't really know your why
Hmm.
and stay centered in that, and
Mm.
have this ability to zoom out and see the bigger picture, how do you have harmony?
Yeah, exactly. Those big questions, the personal development, the personal work. And what you're saying makes me think of even when I'm working with people who aren't founders, who are in corporate roles, there is still this sense of clarifying like where do you fit in into the bigger picture of your role, the bigger outcomes of your organization. And so I find that people are just asking better questions. Like if they truly do not see maybe a future within their organization, they're just kind of chugging along because they feel like they have to. It's asking, hey, can I, get some support? Can I grow my team? Can I do, the things that would make this role work for me to grow in the ways that you want to grow, or be challenged in the ways that you want to be challenged? And so there is this like underlying advocacy of advocating in your work, on your teams, and also at home, like advocating, this is how I need people to
Mm-hmm.
pitch in, or this is what's going to happen during my busy season at work, to make sure that you are bolstered and that the conditions in your life are really set up so that you thrive.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Yeah. And I think it's also like about kind of these internal expectations that we take on of like, well, I should be able to like be a stay at home mom and do all of
Mm,
these things for my children while at the same time having a full 20, 40-hour a week career and keep that
mm,
aspect of myself. And it's like, where do these things come from? I don't know, the
mm,
patriarchy, but
mm,
it's a lot to be carrying around. And so I love how you use the word advocating, because I think a lot of women oftentimes don't learn how to advocate for themselves.
mm,
And sometimes having a kid helps you learn how to do that
mm.
for your child, but you
Yeah.
don't, you have to, again, it's one of those things where you have to remember to do it for yourself
Yeah.
and find, I guess, have some, what you're talking about is like having some ownership over life as you want it, not
Mm,
life as everyone else expects.
yeah. And when you're saying this about the external, scrutiny that you might be receiving, so often it's coming from other moms.
Mm.
And so I hear at drop off, I didn't make the cookies. I didn't do that. I'm not signing up for the PTO. And so that criticism, I feel like uniquely kind of digs at people. And so one thing that I am leaning into more and more these days is just recognizing that we think of these like villages that we need and community supports. And I think that the scrutiny we get from other women, especially, digs at us in a unique way. So making sure that you also take agency over intentionally being in communities of support with other women. So it may not be those moms who are at your kid's school or, just because you work with like that, those may not be your people. And especially when we're talking about the kinds of things we're talking about, like wanting to mother in the way that really lives up to your expectations, wanting to be in your work and be purposeful and do meaningful things, like all of this personal work you're doing. Maybe the people in those settings, they just don't happen to be in a season of life where that's what their priority is. And so, really intentionally being in spaces where research has come out that it says for women, especially, they're 2.5 times more likely to earn more and have higher titles if they have communities of other women. Those shared experiences, our stories are so powerful and it actually has an impact on our lives. So it is really important now that we, find these community spaces, build those relationships. It's not just I felt like in my motherhood experience, it was no longer a nice to have. It shifted into an essential for me.
Yeah, I love this point. And I talk about this a lot in terms of like community as mothers, especially in
Mm,
this day and age when we're all feeling so isolated from each other. And I
yeah,
think one way, you make the point of being around women of support, and that is so important. And then added on to that is this idea of how do I model support for other mothers who are different
yeah,
than me and have
yeah,
made different choices than I've made. Like I just thought of this example where like I was able to be at this performance of my son's, like a midday thing, which like a lot of working parents can't do. And
yeah.
my son was like in this performance with this other working mom who was not able to be there. And I made sure to like record it and send it to
That's
her while she
amazing.
was at work. Like how do
Yeah,
we show up for each other and be like, make her feel like she's there with us, but she also
yeah,
has to be at work. And like, I'm not sitting there saying, what's wrong with these moms who can't show up in the middle of the day, right? I could
yep,
come from a place of like judgment, or I could
yeah.
come from a place of like, how do I support this other mom in her very different life and very different choices? And I think we really have to, on a regular basis, think about how we can show up for people and how we can
Mm.
support a variety of the ways that this harmony and this work life balance looks for different women.
Yeah, it's making me laugh because it's making me think of the golden rule. And like, if you just put yourself in the seat of, I couldn't be there. I had, that important meeting. What would I
Right.
like? What would make a difference to me? And so it's those little things. It's so funny. Last week I was at a networking event and someone I had just met, like they just like loved the idea of my business and the work I was doing. And so they had forwarded a summit that like now I'm going to speak in the summit because this person like was thoughtful enough to think of, hey, this is a great opportunity that's really aligned for you. And so like think about like that doesn't take a lot of time to do to share something you saw that might support someone, but I think we overthink sometimes what is supportive, what does support look like, and it can be a small thing, but I love that you share that story because it is just important that we're intentional enough with
Yeah.
with thinking through with the thoughtfulness of showing up for one another.
Yeah, and like the theme of both of our work is also like it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be like planned out and thought through. Like you said, it can happen in a small conversation or just popping a video over to somebody. But like
Mm-hmm.
there are all these micro ways to
Mm-hmm.
support each other. And I think I'm glad we're spending time on this topic because I think that our lives as mothers, as working mothers, are so overloaded and intense. And we often feel like there isn't any extra, but it's one of those things. It's the same as like rest, right? Like you have to
Mm-hmm.
rest. It's essential. It's not
Mm-hmm.
added extra. This is the same thing. We have to help each other. We have to. And
Mm-hmm.
it shouldn't be an added extra thing if you have time. It should be finding little micro ways to
Mm-hmm.
reach out and be a support to another woman, another mother. It's just, I think it is essential.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you say like the microwaves, it's also make me think about microwaves to find time for ourselves.
Yeah.
Like, I was saying sometimes it's like, if someone struggles to find 20 minutes, and I think for a lot of us, it's really 2 minutes. It's really that intentional grounding and like foundational, point at the start of your day, resets during the course of your day. Because I think when you're thinking about showing up for yourself, it allows you to better show up for others. I see it for people, in business, managing their teams. It's like if you are being intentional about how to care for yourself, then you're also able to put yourself in someone else's shoes and think like, oh, I'm not going to send this, 9 p.m. email. Let me, schedule it to be in the morning so that they're not, stressed or taking away from their family at times. Like, is there a small thing I can do? And I think it does start with us prioritizing that for ourselves to have this ripple effect on the people around us.
Yeah, that is so important. And yes, we can't give from this very empty bucket, from this empty place. And if we're not doing these things for ourselves, these microwaves of
Mm-hmm.
supporting ourselves, we can't help anybody else and create the kind of culture that we want to live in. And I think it brings up one of these ideas for like again, like work life harmony of like
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of moms can be really really hard on themselves about, showing up 100% almost. We've heard this thing before too, right? Of like when you go to work, you're expected to be like a childless,
Mm-hmm.
familyless working person. And then when you're
Yeah.
home with your kids, you're expected to be somebody who doesn't think about work, somebody who has no work commitments, and talk about like micro ways to be kind to ourselves. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how do we, again, work within these like expectations and this idea that we're supposed to split ourselves into these, fractured versions of ourselves
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to like one whole person who's moving
Yeah.
through life. Talk a little bit about what you see around that.
Yeah. I think the integration is a core to that. I think that when we're really separating out the pieces of our lives, I personally think that it does detriment women to do that because a lot of the skills and tools that you have in your personal life, they absolutely do translate. They cross over and they help you to be more effective across every part of your life, including your work. And so often in coaching sessions, people kind of downplay what they've done or what's on their resume and all of that because they haven't done it in a professional setting or a professional context. Hiring is a great example. So, like, maybe you don't have direct reports, you haven't hired someone in your workplace, yet you've brought on a nanny, you have someone like living, working in your home, the most important decision you'll make, like trusting who is going to help care for your child. So, like, are you really thinking about how much that counts and how much you put into that search? But also so many other ways women are tend to be like rooted in their community in ways where they're volunteering, they're sitting on boards, they're doing all of these other things, and so your skills in those settings absolutely count and add value and experience that maybe you're not getting the opportunity in corporate or in your business just yet. And so it's so important that you capture these things happening in other parts of your life and are able to speak to and share these stories in ways that amplify you professionally and also show what you're capable of because they're still your lived experiences.
I love that. And I also feel like if you don't do that and you just try to like leave these major pieces of you outside the
Mm,
door, like you're not going to feel authentic. You're not going to feel integrated. You're not going to feel harmonious because
yeah.
you've had to, again, like fracture yourself and leave big parts of you that could, like, to your point, benefit your
Hmm.
work or benefit your home life. And, one of the things I see with working moms and their kids is like, again, this idea that we're supposed to, our generation has this idea that we're supposed to sort of almost erase ourselves as a
Mm,
person to our
mm,
children so that we can be empathetic towards them, be a support for
mm,
them. And we need to be empathetic and a support for our children, but that
yeah.
does not equal erasing ourselves as
Mm,
women, whatever our makes up our identity,
mm,
those things teach our kids a lot. And one of the major things we teach our kids is that my mother is a whole person.
mm,
She has work that she cares about. She has friends that she cares about. She has community organizations that she cares about. Maybe she has political views she cares about, whatever it may be. Like
yeah.
she is a full person, and that's who is with me every day. Right. So,
Yeah.
yes, there's a balance. We don't want to be on our phones all day long while we're with our
Right.
kids. Right. Like we're all battling these devices. But at the same time, balancing it with like sometimes mom has to take a work call and like you're
Hmm.
sitting here and you can read your book and you're okay
Hmm.
and mom's going to go take a work call and like
Yeah.
we don't need to and we shouldn't erase who we are to our
Yeah.
children either.
Yeah. And there's so much choice wrapped up in that too, because
Mm,
I think people think integration, sometimes they think that that's going to mean that they bleed all parts of their lives and it's muddled and they're not going to have separation. And how can I be present with my kids if I'm also like thinking about, my work and how I can, get a few minutes for that. I find that it's the opposite. So intentionally choosing like, hey, I'm going to integrate my day and I am going to, while I drop off my son at karate, I'm going to, for that hour, have a plan. These are the work calls I'm going to make. These are the, emails I'm going to follow up on. So that when you're home, you're not doing that and you're able to shut off and actually have that cutoff time for yourself that you respect. And so you're actually able to be more fully engaged and present in the evening, when you do get home or whatever that looks like that best supports you in your day. And so I think that is just worthwhile to share that integration doesn't mean like constant bleeding and commingling of things, but choosing what's going to be the most beneficial because I completely agree. Like your child knowing my mom has work that she's excited about, and that forms their relationship with work. It doesn't have to be this miserable thing pulling you away from your family, from your like that you don't want to do. It can be something you're excited to engage in.
yeah, I love that. And a lot of what you're talking about too is just like mindfulness around your choices. So,
Yeah.
your choice might be to take a work call on a Saturday because it's important and you need to. But as long as that's mindful about what you're doing. And,
Mm,
a lot of times when I work with moms and looking at children's behavior, we kind of start with like looking at the patterns, right? Like
mm,
we're not sitting there worrying about something that just happened one time. We're sitting there
yeah.
looking at these patterns. And then again, with ourselves, if there is a pattern of like, working a lot when we're around our children and we don't like that pattern but how do we look at that pattern with like some compassion and
Yeah.
understand why it's happening and understand why it's bleeding out. And then the same time with being with our kids, if we're feeling like we're erasing ourselves too much around our children and
Yeah.
we're not showing them that sometimes moms need to do other things, like we see these patterns, we look at them with care, and then we make
Mm,
adjustments. And sometimes it's about getting support to then get back into new habits that make us just feel more aligned and feel better. I think a lot of women are probably nodding their heads to a lot of what we're talking about today.
mm,
And if, a mom is feeling a lot of guilt, feeling
mm,
torn in a million directions, feeling like they can't get any of these jobs right,
mm,
what do you recommend that people kind of start with, or where do they
mm,
start in terms of like taking baby steps to
mm.
come to more alignment and come to more harmony?
Yeah, it's really aligned with what you were just saying about like really paying attention to the patterns. And so I would say starting with an audit, and even if it's just for a few days, auditing at the end of the day, where was your time spent? Where did maybe where did you leak energy? Like it just didn't feel productive. What worked for you, what didn't. And if you do that for a week, for 2 weeks, it can really uncover some things that have just become habits for you. Like you leak your energy without even realizing it. And so that can be like a really like easy way to start being a little bit more intentional with pockets of time. I think there's a really funny thing that, as long as we have a plan for those like little pockets of time that we like default to scrolling or checking email, if we have a plan for it, it actually helps us to be so much more productive and effective with that time. So I have this, 10 easy ways to create harmony resource, and I'll be sure to share it with your audience and include in the links because it is just like these default things. And you think of course, if there's other things that belong on your list, but it's nice to have something to come through that's just like none of them take more than 10 minutes. And it's just like quick, easy, like let me be intentional with those spaces when they come up. And the funny part about that story is that people like it was referred to as time confetti. And so I'll have to think, but you know what I mean? Like that ambiguous time.
Yeah.
Like, what are you going to do with 5 minutes? And so using the time confetti intentionally.
I love that time confetti. That's great. And thank you for that tool and sharing it with our audience because it sounds so great. I love the idea of this like non-judgmental audit, right? Where you're just kind of
Mm,
like taking note and observing like what's
yeah,
happening and how you're spending your time. And you get to decide what the things are that you want to change.
yeah,
And it's funny because one of the audits that I like to do with moms is to go through their days and think about what of these things that you're doing every day do you actually not need to do?
yeah,
Because there's so much I mean, there's so much we have to do. And don't get me started on the mental load for moms.
yeah,
But there is like a whole area of things that we are just convincing ourselves we have to do or that needs to be done, or even like overdoing for our children in ways that
yeah,
they could learn how to support themselves. And the massive way I like to think about this too is what are those things that we can offload to somebody else? Like you mentioned this
yeah.
earlier in our conversation of like, can my partner pick this thing up? Can my mom help me with this thing? Can
Mm,
this kid learn how to do this thing on their own? And
yeah,
really enabling and empowering others to take
mm,
on jobs and work and, whatever it may be, because
yeah,
as moms, again, societally, we are accepting this pressure that it should all be done by us. And we should advocate for ourselves and not
mm,
accept that.
yeah. I like at the question, what would happen if it didn't get done?
Right. That's
what,
great.
what happens?
What would
Probably maybe
happen? And I
nothing.
think that can work for work and
Mm,
family, right? Is like,
yeah.
I think about that too. Sometimes I'm like, okay, I'll bring my son home and then I'll sit down and work for an hour. And I'm like, I ask myself, does anything actually need to get done today between 5 and
Mm,
6 p.m.? You know what I mean? Like,
mm,
do those things actually need to get done? And sometimes I'm like, no, it's okay. Just like go make dinner. And then sometimes I'm like, no, you need to sit down and like finish. These
yeah.
things do need to get done. So,
Yeah.
really asking ourselves these questions and getting in the practice of working with
Mm,
someone like you to help you practice like asking yourself these questions where you learn how to self audit on the regular.
yeah. I love this conversation. It's
Yeah.
just so fun to get a window into your work and the way that you support families to have this like natural state of flow with their routines and feel like it's on track with how they want to live.
Yeah, well, you do exactly the same thing. And I think it is important that moms understand the different types of support that's out there for them
Yeah.
and look for it, seek it out, accept it. Like we are in
Mm,
a golden age of
mm,
support that sometimes sometimes there's support out there that's financially prohibitive, and sometimes
mm.
there's support out there that is free and we don't take it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
there's a lot of ways to look at support. And I think this is a great conversation in terms of getting moms like more in this like normalcy of
Mm,
going with the flow, with being a bit more harmonious, and the importance of that for themselves, and what are
mm.
the tools out there to help them get there. So Amy, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm going to list all your links in the show notes, but please tell people how they can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's such a joy to be here. My information, Coaching W Amy is my website. Coaching W underscore Amy is my Instagram. And then on LinkedIn is where I'm most active, just Amy Pierre-Russo.
Thank you. I know so many moms would just benefit so much from talking to you, from working with you, as I have. So thanks again for being with us today.
Thank you, Jess. I value this time and the space that you create. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Nurture Network. If this episode resonated with you, subscribe so you won't miss the next one. Share it with a fellow mom who might need it too. Until next time, remember that nurturing yourself is the first step in nurturing your family.